Welcome back, my classic horror lovers. With Halloween over, I have one spooky review left over from watching in October. However, I was unable to review it during the Halloweenfest, but that doesn't mean we have to stop watching scary movies. Of course not. I still continue to do Frightening Friday flicks. I don't do them every Friday. However, I try to get out about at least one or two Frightening Friday flicks every month, but I will be coming back to, of course, my normal drama and just normal film reviews. However, tonight we are more concerned with a scary movie. Tonight's review is of The Spiral Staircase, and this film came out in 1946, and it's one of my personal favorites. I've been meaning to review this one for quite some time. It's an RKO film, and it stars one of my favorite actors, George Brent, Dorothy McGuire. It has, of course, Ethel Barrymore as the crabby old woman in this. I swear, she always plays sort of the rude, crabby old woman. However, she's actually sweet and nice. She always plays that character. And then we also have Elsa Lanchester. I like to note her because, of course, she was the bride of Frankenstein. And also Rhonda Fleming was in this. In fact, Selznick originally owned the rights to the story of the Spiral Staircase. He owned the rights to the book called Some Must Watch by Ethel White. And he was working on a production. He was working on a movie. However, he needed funds. Duel in the Sun, which is, I did a mega review on Duel in the Sun if you ever want to check that out. That's one of the best classic Western movies of all time. But part of that deal was for him to give Rhonda Fleming and the rights to the story to RKO. So we get The Spiral Staircase, which I love. And he also lent out Dorothy McGuire as well in this. Now, The Spiral Staircase I would describe as another psychological horror film, a little similar to The Innocents, which we reviewed during our Halloweenfest. However, not as over-the-top psychological horror, but it's honestly up there, especially considering it's 1946. Robert Siodmak, I don't know exactly how to pronounce his last name. Robert Siodmak directed this, and interestingly enough, I reviewed one of his films not too long ago, The Great Sinner, or The Great Sin. I can't remember I believe The Great Sin, with Gregory Peck, and I love that film. And he nailed it out of the park again with this movie. No, it's The Great Sinner. And so this film, it takes place in the early 1900s, and it's a period piece, and it takes place in New England. It primarily takes place in an old Victorian home. However, I want to first note the opening of the film. It opens in an old theater, 1900s theater, where everyone's watching a silent picture. And I love this scene because it's like watching people from back in the day watch a movie in a theater, and it's just cool. And while they're watching the film, we then see upstairs a beautiful woman essentially undressing, and there's an eye in her closet staring at her like a peeping Tom almost. Now, I thought this was ahead of its time, that they would have someone doing something so creepy, invading a woman's privacy like that. And then we don't see him, we only see the eye close up, and we hear very spooky music and sort of that classic 1950s sound effect that you would hear all the time in the 1950s. And then she's murdered, and because we hear her screams from down below. Now we then learn that there is a serial killer on the loose in this town, and it sets the stage. And we also learn that this serial killer, he has a thing for murdering women with handicaps, women with some sort of issue, whether it's they can't speak, they're deaf, they can't walk, they're crippled. He has some sort of, I don't want to call it a fetish, but some sort of issue with women who have problems with their bodies. It's very messed up, honestly. Almost sort of like Hitler and how he wanted to kill everyone with defects in their bodies. Now, we then learn that Dorothy McGuire, she's walking home, and I want to note how she's walking in the woods. It's a windy day. We can tell there's a storm coming. She's in the woods, and I was thinking, is there someone stalking her in these woods? And it's just a creepy setting. And then she walks up to this mansion, and we then see that someone is stalking her in the secrecy of nighttime, because we see the lightning lights up the surroundings, and we can see that it has to be this serial killer. And we learn that Dorothy McGuire's character, she has a problem with speaking. She witnessed something very tragic when she was younger, and ever since she can't speak. I believe her parents died in a fire or something along those lines. So, of course, she's likely to be the serial killer's next victim, because she has a defect with her body. She can't speak. Now then, we learn that in this Victorian home, beautiful setting. I've said many times in past reviews, I'm such a sucker for black and white movies and old Victorian homes, period piece, because just directors of photography just can play on the shadows like no other in these homes. And we learn that there's a dysfunctional family. George Brent, the charming actor, is essentially the head of the house at this point. His brother, his half-brother, is sort of this playboy who just sort of does what he wants. He just came back into town, and he's just has the hots for Rhonda Fleming, who apparently George Brent originally liked her, was in love with her. Now, and Ethel Barrymore, she's this sickly, crabby old woman who is just bedridden. She can't get out of bed, and what's her name? Dorothy McGuire. She is sort of just there to help around the house, help take care of Ethel Barrymore, and so we then learn that she is also in love with a doctor, and this doctor, he is a dashing good man, and he comes to see Ethel Barrymore's. I don't know if it's Ethel or Ethel, so I'm sorry because I keep switching between the two. And she tells Dorothy McGuire, you need to leave this house. You are in danger in this house. You will die if you stay in this house. And she tells the doctor, look, please just get her as far away from this house as you can. So it's almost like she's suspicious of someone living in the house, whether it's one of her sons, of being the serial killer. So I don't want to give the entire movie away, but essentially we have little stories, little dynamics going on in the house, and we're trying to figure out who's the killer. Is it the garden keeper? Is it the doctor? Is it the mess of a stepson or mess of a son? Is it the charming son played by George Brent? And all throughout this movie, we keep seeing this eye, this awful eye of the serial killer staring, and we don't know whose eye it is. In fact, when I was young, I thought it was... Actually, I didn't know whose eye it was, but obviously I thought maybe it's George Brent. It kind of looks like his eye. But in fact, it was the director's eye, Robert Siodmak. it was his eye in these scenes. Now, I don't want to give away who the killer is, who the serial killer is, because I want you to see this movie. In fact, when I first saw it, I almost gave this movie, I don't give star ratings to horror films, but I almost gave it a perfect 4 out of 4 stars. So I want you to see this because there's certain scenes, for example, when just the spiral staircase itself. I mean, there's beautiful shadows every time we see this. When they're going up and down the stairs, all the way to the climax scene where the killer is eventually, spoiler alert, the killer is eventually shot and killed by Barrymore, which is a epic finale in my opinion. And just the setting, as I said, the Victorian home and the rainy, stormy night. You can hear the lightning, you can hear the wind. It's just perfect. It's sort of like the old house in terms of setting, but much more beautiful photography. This movie was a success when it came out. I think it's starting to become very much of a classic that a must see for people to watch. Let me read my original review that I had of the spiral staircase. I sort of wrote notes back in 2014, although I originally saw this when I was a little kid. This is what I said in 2014. One of my classics growing up. This is one of the best suspense horror films of the classic movie era. McGuire is suffering from a tragedy she experienced when she was young, so she is unable to speak. And the scenes where it shows her mouth covered up from the serial killer's perspective is just so, it's disturbing, because this is like getting in the mind of a serial killer. This is what a killer sees when she looks in the mirror and he sees that. It just disturbs him so much he needs to kill her. And the other thing I wanted to note was this: Hitchcock had to have been inspired by this movie to make Psycho, because in this movie we have the killer has, spoiler alert, big daddy issues. And as in Psycho, with what's his name, Norman Bates, he has mommy issues and he turns into a killer. So Hitchcock had to have seen this and been at least a little bit inspired by the film. So anyway, the movie takes place in the early 1900s in a very elegant Victorian home. McGuire lives with a wealthy family that is dysfunctional. Barrymore is the sick, crabby old woman, parentheses, of course, who continues to warn McGuire to get out of the house. There is a killer on the loose who kills women with handicaps. The setting is perfect, and the stormy night makes this a Halloween classic. So watch this at Halloween time, really, guys. Brent's eyes, see, I thought it was George Brent's eyes, but it really was the director's stare is so memorable, and the 50s space sound effect. This movie was beautifully filmed, capturing all the shadows of the mansion. Lanchester was also the perfect maid who always takes drinks from her master's cellar. The conclusion is great when Brent is chasing McGuire on the spiral staircase, ending with Barrymore shooting him several times. This is a movie, this is a must-see during Halloween, and I'll definitely be re-watching it over the years. I'm sure Hitchcock was influenced by it for Psycho. So please watch this movie. And we're back with the Frightening Friday flicks, guys. I hope you enjoyed this review, and keep your eye open for more. Stay spooky, guys.